are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Exciting news. This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who have been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com, and then definitely follow them on Instagram for all the information that you need, because I'm sure that's where you follow us as well, at oklahomahof. Let's get into today's episode. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode down in the Central Exchange building today with the lovely Eote Coffee. I was always center stage. This is a free ad because they're worth it. Great coffee and a great building. And my guest today has an office directly above Eote Coffee. So no doubt, if you read his website, it says he's fueled by coffee, and that's... it's not hard to believe when you're right above Eote Coffee. So, Kevin Deshazo on the podcast today. Really appreciate your time, and thanks for inviting me down. You're a very busy man, but as we've just been speaking before this, it's different situations now with 2020 and not traveling, COVID stuff. So, for a man that usually travels a lot, we'll get into why you travel. But for everyone listening, I guess elevator pitch. Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, elevator pitch. I essentially just work with leaders and teams to help them get better, helping leaders become better leaders, helping teams become better teams, build better cultures, so they don't just have a good year, a good quarter, a good month, a good season, but to have consistent success. And so most of my time is spent in the sports world. And so I run a company called Culture Wins, which is the sports division of a company called Giant. So Giant does leader development around the globe with the Air Force, with Google, with Chick-fil-A, down to mom and pop shops. And I run their sports division, working mostly with collegiate athletic departments and sports teams.
Yeah. So travel all the time and you've got to be a huge sports fan to be working with sports all the time, right?
Oh, it's funny. So played basketball growing up, was a massive sports fan, wanted to work in sports. Mm-hmm. Growing up, I grew up in the Jordan era, so wanted to work for the Chicago Bulls, wanted to work for a team. And then I remember I went to Oklahoma State, and Mark Cuban bought the Mavericks somewhere around that time. And their players were getting PlayStations and sound systems in their lockers. And I'm like, this is crazy. I want to work for that guy. And so I remember sending Mark Cuban probably 100 emails wanting to work for the Mavericks. And so now it's I get to work for every team. I don't have to work for a team. I get to work with hundreds of teams. And so it's, as someone who's grown up loving sports, getting to be around sports and sports leaders for my job is pretty fun.
Yeah. So you grew up in Oklahoma then?
Mostly. So I grew up in Missouri. Moved to Oklahoma in 7th grade, moved to Tulsa, and have been in Oklahoma since then.
Yeah, and then been an OSU fan, I assume, for a long time.
Yeah, and so I grew up an Arkansas fan, so a lot of family in Arkansas. Went to Oklahoma State after high school, and of course fell in love with OSU. And it's interesting being not fully from Oklahoma. It's OSU and OU, right? And so there are clear-cut lines. And I went to OSU because they gave me more money, right, for a scholarship. I'm like, I'll go there. Most of my friends went to OU because they had just won the national championship the year I graduated high school. Yeah. And I went to Jinx, so a big football school, and we got to keep being champions. And so a lot of people went to OU. But so yeah, love OSU. Although OU is a client, so that's always fun.
Yeah.
It's a weird dynamic, but yeah.
Yeah. So, growing up and then going to Jinx is a powerhouse. Has been a powerhouse for a long time.
Yeah.
And you said you grew up kind of Jordan era, so a huge basketball fan.
Yep.
Do you play high school basketball?
I did until my sophomore year.
Okay.
Yeah, quit my sophomore year. Probably wasn't good enough. Yeah. I could use the excuse of didn't like the coach or whatever. I just probably wasn't good enough.
But you had that realization too, I'm not going to go to college to do this, I'm going to do something else.
Although I say that, I had friends, so I played at different times. I was on 4 or 5 different teams, right? The high school team and different travel teams. And I had friends that I was on travel teams with that didn't play on our high school team that went D2, D3. That was, I honestly didn't know those schools existed. Yeah. So probably could have gone to a small D2, D3 school and played. But even that may have been a stretch.
Yeah. So sophomore year, you I'm done with basketball, but I still obviously have this passion for sports. what are you think? Do you know what your degree is going to be in? Are you just, I'm going to see what the next 2 years is like at school and then decide, or was university like, I'm definitely going to go to university?
Yeah, that was always the plan. Didn't know what I wanted to study until my senior year. So when I decided to go to Oklahoma State, computers were becoming a massive thing. So this was the year 2000. That was when I graduated, and loved computers, loved messing around with computers. So I figured at that point I loved sports, but computers seemed like a good route to take. And so went to Oklahoma State and went in knowing that I wanted my degree in management information systems. By the time I got probably year 3, I realized like this is not what I want to do. At that point I was like, it's too late, whatever, I'll just get the degree and figure the rest of life out. Didn't know if I would ever work in sports.
Right.
Didn't really have any contacts in sports. It was just always something that I enjoyed. Now I talk to friends or people in the industry that I work with who they interned at the athletic department, in college, or they had jobs in the athletic department. I'm like, had no clue I was just so unaware of things.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a miracle that I ended up in the industry.
Yeah. But I guess you always kind of had a passion for motivation, leadership, and speaking as well?
Leadership, yes. Speaking, no. Okay. And leadership, I always found myself in leadership positions, and I don't know that I always deserved those, but I always found myself in positions of influence. And so from a pretty young age, leadership was something that I thought about, something that I was interested in. Speaking, I had never done any speaking. Other than, right, we make public speaking into this big deal, like all of life really is public speaking. This is public speaking. Yeah. Most people are just afraid of looking dumb, but it's like we speak publicly all day long, And so my first quote unquote speech was, so after college, I was in the healthcare recruiting world. And I'd gone to our corporate office for some training, and our president at our office here in Oklahoma said, "Hey, give a presentation to our team on what you learned." And so I had to put together this PowerPoint, and it was, I wish I still had it. It would have to be so bad. I remember like the title slide graphic was like the eye of a hurricane, and it had nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
Right. It was just like, I had found a picture on the internet of a hurricane that had just happened from outer space. And so I was like, this is cool. Doesn't apply at all.
Yeah.
But that was to 20 people. And so when I had my first actual public speaking gig with this work and doing social media training is kind of how I got into the college sports world. I had never actually given a talk in front of a large group.
Yeah.
My first one was 400 people.
Which is, that's a lot.
It's a large group.
Yeah. And it's, when you're on stage for the first time, you got the lights in your eyes. It's like, you can kind of see the first 10 rows, and then thankfully you can't see anybody else, which is great.
Yeah.
You just kind of go for it. But, when you graduate, for 2000 going to college, and social media really is, I guess it's not,
it's nothing.
It's nothing, right?
Yeah.
So when you were in college, was it kind of peaking, or was this after that you went into social media stuff?
Yeah. So Facebook came out. I want to say the Facebook, right? Came out. Well, that's what it was called then. I want to say it came out my last year of college.
So 04, right?
Somewhere around there. Yep. Yeah. And it wasn't everywhere, right?
Sure.
So I was at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
My wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, she was at Oklahoma Baptist University about an hour away. They didn't have the Facebook. And so it wasn't everywhere. Social media for me became this thing. So I was in healthcare recruiting. That was my first job out of college, did that for a number of years. And, Twitter came out. Yeah. I always hated Facebook. I was never, sorry, any Facebook people listening.
My mom.
Yeah, it's like it's just never been. I've just never gotten joy from it, right? And then Twitter came out, and something in my brain clicked. Like, yes, Twitter was access. Right, early on, like I'm following Shaquille O'Neal, I'm following presidents. I remember having a conversation on Twitter with James Harden when he was with the Thunder. I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Which is just ridiculous, but it's like it was access, and it just made so much sense. And so we started using it as a recruiting tool in our company, because the economy was kind of tanking, and our corporate office kept kind of taking resources away from us. And we were a healthcare staffing company, so we would have basically jobs placed on healthcare job boards, and we would take those nurses and place them in jobs. Well, we couldn't attract nurses if we didn't have access to these job boards, and so we started using Facebook to recruit. And that was kind of an aha moment for me of like, this is more than just like pictures of my aunt's cat or whatever. It's like, this could be a business tool. And so I something about it just was natural for me. And so guys on our team, they knew that I was kind of frustrated and burnt out. They're like, you should go be like a social media whatever.
Consultant or something, yeah.
And this was at the time where anyone with a Twitter account considered themselves a social media expert.
Okay.
And for me, it was like, just ethically, I'm like, no, I don't, like, I love social media. I get it to a degree. And I could have gone and done that easily, right? Because people did, like, I've got a Twitter account. I'm a social media ninja.
Yeah.
Ethically, I'm like, I don't really understand it to that level yet. Because it's not, right? It's more than just posting on social media. It's marketing, it's advertising, it's communicating. It's not just, hand it to your daughter. Hey, my daughter spends a lot of time on Instagram, so she's going to run our Instagram account. And so then I went and I worked with a team here in Oklahoma City who did that. And the guy who runs it, Mike Kaler, with Smirk New Media, he had transitioned the Oklahoman, major newspaper in town, I guess major newspaper in the state, from print to digital. He had done some things for large organizations. So I went and kind of learned under him the real kind of ins and outs of social media for business. And at the same time started to launch Fieldhouse Media for working with student athletes on how to build their brand. Because that piece I felt comfortable with. Advising businesses, wasn't quite sure yet. Building a personal brand, I was confident with that.
Yeah. So you went down that route and that was
left the corporate world.
Yeah.
And started my own healthcare recruiting company. So left that. Thought I could do my own thing because I was really successful at that. Was one of the best in the company. Our company was one of the best in the country. So ego, I'm like, I'm one of the best in the country. This is gonna be, I'll just go do it for myself, make the money for myself. Didn't work out quite so well. Turns out it's difficult when you don't have the resources of a $500 million company behind you. So failed miserably.
Yeah.
Like $0 fail. But I just kept seeing student athletes getting in trouble on social media. And this was 09-ish, 2010. So student athletes were getting banned from social media. All the conversation around student athletes and social media was negative.
Yeah.
And I just saw social media as this really great thing. And obviously there are negatives and there are risks associated with it. But I thought this could be a really powerful thing for student athletes and for their programs. Again, didn't know anybody in college sports and was failing at another business, but I just had this idea. And a friend of mine finally said, look, man, either do something or just stop talking about it.
Yeah.
So to my wife, I'm like, hey, I'm clearly great at business. I've made $0 with this one. I think I'm going to launch another one. She, for whatever reason, believed in it. And we launched Fieldhouse Media in 2010, 2011-ish. And 10 years later, I've been on 250 campuses.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild.
That's mad, isn't it?
Oh, and there's no reason, again, I knew nobody in this industry.
Right.
I just used Twitter to connect with sports information directors. Didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
Athletic directors, whoever I could find, trying to share this idea that social media is a good thing. And it's been wild.
That's awesome. And it's funny you say that people get caught out because there was a mate of mine on my team at SNU. He, you can't bet when you're a student athlete, right? So I think he had his dad place a bet on the Masters, Adam Scott to win the Masters, and he did. And my friend just was said something either on Facebook or Twitter or something, and it just said, "Thank you, Adam Scott, show me the money." And this would have been Masters. We obviously would have been here, but his dad placed the bet back home,
right?
And I mean, it was like he was asked to leave the school, scholarship gone, and and it was
for such a simple, harmless thing,
and there's a lot of bad stuff around it. It was not a good situation, and he's an international kid too.
Right.
People who know me and know that guy will be listening to this. They know the entire situation. But I think also at the time, our athletic, compliance was brand new in the job, and we'd just gone to D2, and she was not in a position to let anything slide. It was like, I need to make an example.
And with social media early on, there was so much fear and overreacting. And the NCAA has said multiple, because I would have conversations with administrators and leaders at the NCAA, and they're like, whenever we try to implement something around social media or anything really, but especially social media, they're like, we're already 5 years behind.
Oh yeah.
And so their mindset around it was so that seemed like a big deal.
Yeah.
It was truthfully harmless.
Right.
Didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of that. I mean, there are hundreds of those stories where people see posting seemingly harmless things, and most of the time they actually were, and face some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah, and we, thankfully everything worked out. He went to a different university in Oklahoma City and just kind of had a great time and was successful and graduated. But yeah, it was just kind of it was a rough scene for a lot. And the team, it kind of broke up a little bit of the thing in the team, but especially the golf team, smaller and a lot tight knit. But also, like, personal experience, me and that same guy actually, we're from the UK. We travel, and at SNU they do different things differently, as well as NCAA stuff. So we had posted a picture of us having a beer on the plane, like last beer before we go back to school. And by the time I got back to school, I had that picture that we'd posted on Instagram of us like cheersing, I guess, on the plane to go back home. Was slid under my door at SNU in like A4. It was printed out and laminated and just slid under the door and just said, "Come see me in the morning." And I was like, "What's this all about?" So I missed one golf tournament because of that, I think. I mean, at the time, I was like, whatever, it's stupid. Right. But looking back, I'm like, I'm the idiot for posting stuff as well.
And that was most of what I was trying to do is, I wasn't trying to come in to tell student athletes, don't tweet this, don't post that, don't be an idiot. Because most of that, I mean, there are still people who post terrible things. But for me to come in and say that doesn't really help you. Right. It's like, hey, don't post pictures of you. Well, that's not, what are you supposed to post, right? It's to say like, okay, I know what not to do, but me not posting dumb things doesn't mean I'm using it well. Yeah. Right. It's like, you have to have some kind of purpose. And so that was the idea of, and early on, even at schools, like, hey, will you come scare our kids off social media? And I was like, sure. Like, whatever got me to the school. Like, absolutely. That was not going to be my message when I got there, but everyone was just so afraid of it. Like, it terrified people. And then it's so crazy how now it's switched from let's ban them and scare them off of it to now let's equip, not just educate them on how to use it well. Now let's give them resources to actually build a brand they can monetize. Yeah. Like, and that's becoming a recruiting tool. And so it's just fascinating in a decade how drastically that's shifted.
I saw yesterday, I think OSU announced that they'd partners with a company called, is it Influencer? And that, so that would be a huge
there's several companies out there doing stuff like that. And the idea is essentially, it's almost like Dropbox, right? The schools have so much content of these athletes because they're taking pictures and videos at practice, at games, traveling, and people follow people more than they follow brands. Even some of these like traditional college fan bases. I was at Nebraska several years ago when Bo Pelini was still there, and Bo rarely used Twitter. He had more Twitter followers than Nebraska. It's like Nebraska's like a household college football name.
It's an institution.
That's right. And it's like, but Bo Pelini, who rarely used it, had more followers. So people follow people more than brands. And so schools are realizing if we have all this content, if we can get it into the hands of our student athletes. So it's basically an app where a student athlete will open, they've got basically their own folder of content that they can then share. And so it's just fascinating. And some of these programs, they're now looking at telling a student athlete, this is what you're worth, right? This is what because they're starting, we'll probably pass some name, image, likeness, which is basically saying student athletes can get paid for being a student athlete. Legislation coming soon, and most of that's going to be around social media. They can be paid to be an Instagram influencer or whatever it may be. And so now they're analyzing just how much is our backup wide receiver worth, if he were to post on Instagram, if a company were to pay him. And so it's fascinating how that world has shifted so much.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it, to see, like I said, you've been in it from day one, just to see that, schools are like, we don't want our kids on social media because it'll, they may be losing scholarships and it'll ruin their reputation or whatever, and the school's reputation, to, how can we get these guys the value that they deserve, that they, and what is it? It's in California right now, right? Or it's coming soon.
They expect it to be, now a lot of things could change because now administrators are kind of going back and forth with Congress. Congress is getting involved, which adds, 47 other layers to it. That's right. And because they want to have some kind of uniformity so that California doesn't have a different law than Texas or whatever it may be. But the general expectation before COVID hit was that this would go, basically pass in January 2021 to go into effect August 2021 school year. And so and that's why a lot of these schools are signing deals now to start to prepare for the recruiting classes that are going to be coming in next year and the year after.
Which is, that's so exciting for kids coming in,
massive.
It's going to pay for their college, right?
So, certain ones, absolutely. I mean, some kids will make zero, right?
Well, of course,
and that's totally fine. That's just the nature of the beat, right? The market will decide what they're worth. But I remember I was at a D3 school in Vermont. I mean, this was probably 7 years ago. It was whenever Vine was around.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
And this kid, he was a basketball player at a D3 school. He had 250,000 followers on Vine.
Yeah.
Well, that's significant. You know, it's like he could have been making some serious money off of that. He's not going to make money off basketball, right? And that's okay. And he's not going. He didn't go to a D3 school expecting to make money playing bad. If he does, great.
Yeah.
But it's you have these kids, and I think especially maybe international. I think there's maybe even a bigger opportunity because they're smaller teams, but different kind of audience and global audience. But there are some significant opportunities, and you know, if a kid makes $3,000 a month,
Oh yeah, life changing
in college,
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
Oh my gosh! I mean, I would have thought I was a king if I made $3,000 a month in college.
Yeah.
I mean, there are adults who don't make that today. I mean, it's a really fascinating development. That's gonna be really interesting to watch.
Yeah. Was there a USC player am I correct? That was like had a big YouTube following and just quit. Was
UCF.
that right? UCF, and he just like I'm
Kicker?
done. Something,
Punter?
something like that. He's like I'm done playing football because I'm gonna go make money on YouTube.
Yeah, because the deal was he was going to be ruled ineligible.
Yeah.
Because on his YouTube channel, he would have his UCF jersey, or he would say that he was a UCF football player, and he could monetize it. I mean, YouTube. You know, the kids today are so. I sound like an old person saying that. These kids today, but youth today are such unbelievable creators. Like, and the resources they have available to them, it's pretty incredible. And so he's like, I can make a lot of money on YouTube. I'm a great YouTuber, and it's easy for the olds listening to say, oh, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Look, man, it's a different world.
Yeah.
And if people, it's not up to us to decide what other people determine to be valuable.
Right.
If people find value in this kid's YouTube channel, great.
Yeah.
Good for him. Go monetize it, make money off of it, and take care of yourself, your family. And so it's going to be really interesting. We've seen, even in the NBA bubble, we're seeing now, it's obviously different with pro athletes. A lot of them are making money anyway off social media, but they're starting to vlog. Yeah. And like, this is what life in the bubble is like. Yeah. And I think that will start to move into the college sports space. You're going to get these kids like, man, I'm just going to, what's the life like of a student athlete at the University of Oklahoma or at Texas or SNU? And that's going to generate some potential money for them.
Yeah. Well, and also like, someone who's looking at SNU or a school to go into, they go jump on YouTube and they YouTube SNU, that kid's videos are going to pop up, right? Like that's a great way to
and that's the thing that schools have to get, and they've slowly been getting it, is that if we can help our kids, and this has been my pitch basically since day one, if you can help your student athletes understand how to use social media well, that's massive for the school, because they are your biggest brand ambassadors. Like, probably not supposed to say this, they're not regular students.
No,
right?
Of course not.
Most people aren't following a general chemistry major at OSU, right? Yeah. Now, unless they happen to be taking that chemistry up to YouTube and doing some really interesting stuff. But for the most part, they're not following the general student population on social media.
They don't care what that kid does for his class.
That's right. Yeah. That kid is, unless they do something terrible, is probably not going to be front page news. Right. Whereas student athletes, they consistently are for high school athletes and just for high school students. And so if you help them use it well, that's just it's a recruiting tool for your team, right? Whether it's basketball, golf, swimming, soccer, because you're showing what the culture in campus is like, and the culture of your team and everything about it. But it's also showing that to just general high school students. I want to go to Oklahoma State. Well, let's see what these kids. Wow, that looks amazing. Or that's not what I thought it was.
Right.
And so that if you equip them, that becomes a really powerful opportunity.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's I'm all about it. I love it. I watch more YouTube channels than I do normal TV. I watch more YouTube probably than I do Netflix. Because it's an easy watch, right? That's where the attention is.
And that's what this generation spends their time.
Yeah, I played golf the other day with my golf coach, and he has a young daughter, and she's 10 or 11, and we were talking about cars. We talk about cars quite a bit. It's kind of a passion we both have, and he's like, do you know these kids on YouTube who have these cars? And there was like two brothers who have millions and millions of subscribers. You're like, where are they getting those cars from? Like, that's their cars. Like they
Right.
buy, they're like
That's
16,
right.
17, 18, like buying $400,000 cars
That's
each.
right.
He's like, there's no way. I'm like, no, there's
That's real life.
so much money on YouTube.
Oh, it's insane.
Like, these kids are
a client
doing
that I
great.
work with in the college football space, his son is 10, and the family's worked with him, and they're not trying to be like quote unquote influencers, right?
Yeah.
It's like my kid loves to do whatever it is he's doing,
Right.
and film it. So we're trying to help him out and help him get started. And the dad goes, I'm not joking. He got a $1,200 check.
Yeah.
Month 2.
That's amazing.
The parents are like,
Absolutely
what?
amazing. Yeah.
It's our 10-year-old, you know? And so it's just, it's incredible, the opportunities. And again, we can laugh at or devalue like the Kardashian way of the world, right? Of like documenting everything and trying to profit, like whatever, but it's like, it works.
Yeah.
And if it allows someone to take care of their family and it's not unethical, right? It's not like this immoral thing.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess back to kind of what, we just had a really enjoyable talk about YouTube, which I could talk about for 4 hours. But back to you and kind of diving into, this world of social media for college kids and then, building this business, right? This Fieldhouse Media that you're like, right, I'm going to go teach and travel the country and have all these, colleges as clients. I guess, where would have been the first one that you went to?
The first university was Rogers State here in Oklahoma,
Yeah.
up in Claremore. What's funny is that I thought it was Columbus State, which is down in Columbus, Georgia.
Yeah.
And so I posted something a couple years ago because it came up in Time Hop, like traveling. And I remember even then, like, somebody's paying me to get on this plane and fly to Georgia to talk about Twitter. What a world. And then a friend of mine from Rogers State, she was like, no, we were like, it was like 2 days before.
Yeah.
And so the way it kind of happened is, so for a year, I was just creating content, writing, trying to get this perspective across that social media is not the bad guy. And kept writing, kept posting, and people thought it was really funny because there was nobody in that space.
Yeah.
There were people who dabbled, maybe like a journalist who would do this on the side, but there was nobody focused on training and educating student athletes on how to use social media well. And so the more I kept talking about it, people thought Fieldhouse Media was this massive company. It was just me the whole time.
Yeah.
And they thought we were this huge agency. And I get an email 6 months in. I get an email from an organization called COSIDA. No clue what that is. Wanting me to speak at their annual convention.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay. And I'd become friends with some SIDs. So COSIDA is the Sports Information Director Association.
Sure.
So college sports information directors. And I just never heard of COSIDA. Again, college sports, I was a college sports fan, not a college sports insider. Yeah. But I'd become friends with some SIDs through using social media and getting this message out and them saying like, no, this is right. Like, this is what we need to be doing. And so I texted one of them like, hey man, have you ever heard of something called COSIDA? And he's like, yes. I was like, they're asking me if I should speak at their conventions. Like, does that sound like something I should do? And he's like, yeah, there's gonna be 800 people there.
Yeah.
I would do that. Oh, so that was actually my first speaking gig was 800 people.
Yeah.
And had never given a public talk in my life. And there's video of it. I think I may have put it on my YouTube channel, speaking of YouTube. Yeah. And I don't put a lot of effort into my YouTube channel. It's just basically a holding place for videos if people want to find them. But I had this like oversized jacket. I mean, it's terrible. And the luncheon before mine went long. And so they cut my time like in half as I get up there. Oh, hey, you don't have 45 minutes, you have 20. And I'm like, at that point, it's interesting because like my personality, I can adjust. I don't care. Yeah. But I'd never done it. I'd put all this pressure on myself. Like this is my moment, right? To like enter this world. So I was like, I don't care. I'm gonna go through my slides and they're gonna deal with it. Yeah. But as soon as my name got on their agenda, schools started calling.
Awesome.
And it hasn't stopped since. Yeah. I mean, it was just, so that was kind of the tipping point of, because I had no schools until, like I spoke at that convention with 0 clients.
Yeah. And then you have 800 people there
right.
who are 800 schools.
That's right.
And
so it's, and what's been fascinating too is, there are so many schools. I've been in this for a decade, whether it's social media training or leadership and culture building. It's like, there are so many schools I've still never heard of.
Yeah. Oh, there's hundreds.
I'll see school. I'm like,
thousands.
what? Where is? I've been doing this a decade. Like, I still don't know where that school is, you know? So it's just fun. Like, I love traveling, love meeting new people, love being in college towns, and every town, every campus is unique.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun.
Do you collect anything from every college you go to?
I don't. So I should. And part of it, I think if I had a different personality type, I would.
Yeah.
My brain just doesn't operate that way until like 4 years into it. I'm like, man, I should have been like, I should have a wall of things, right?
Hats.
That's right.
Like that.
Hats, shirts, coffee mugs, something.
Yeah.
And I've got nothing.
Not yet.
Yeah. It's like, I've even thought about like going back through, cause you know, I'll go to some schools will give me shirts and hats and gear and different stuff. I've thought about just going back and finding every school I went to. It's like, hey, I spoke there 7 years ago. Can you send me a hat, or I'll buy a hat, and just creating a wall of something, but I probably won't get around to it.
That would be really cool, I guess, in an office setting, right? To have,
that's right.
Know, like, and obviously we're at the home of Giant right now, but if you had like a Giant home office and the wall is covered in hats or low,
I think that'd be a dream at some point, is to, for us, if we needed a bigger space, to have a wall of that.
Wall of Fame. That would be really cool. So from that moment it kicks off and you start getting full schedules and wife's happy now because the business this business is now working.
That's right. Actually making money. Yeah. After 2 years of nothing, we're actually doing okay.
Yeah. And she was at OBU, which is down in Shawnee, and graduated, and you know.
So talking about where the offices of Giant, you know, the kind of parent company of Culture Wins, my wife was employee number 3 of Giant.
So that's the Giant connection.
That's the connection. So she left OBU and started working for Giant. Yeah. And so that was my connection to Jeremy, who runs Giant. And she's been out of Giant for 10 years doing her own thing. But that was the connection. So it was just funny that came full circle. Yeah.
So how long is it until you connect with Giant then while you are doing Fieldhouse Media? Great name, by the way.
Which one? Fieldhouse?
Fieldhouse Media. It's a great name.
That's like, what? Yeah, that's like maybe my most creative genius moment of like my life was that name. So the idea is it came from Allen Fieldhouse, where Kansas plays basketball.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of a name. And I wanted to do, you know, probably something with media, something with sports. And I was like, for some reason, Allen Fieldhouse immediately came into my mind. Just like Fieldhouse Media. I felt like that worked, and it has worked pretty well. Probably 5 years in ish. So again, you know, going back to this idea that leadership has always been kind of in the back of my mind, a passion, and getting to do the social media training. So we started, it was just initially student athletes.
Yeah.
And then I realized if I really want this to stick, like a talk doesn't really change anything. It's helpful.
Right.
A talk probably makes it stick for 30-40% of those kids, right? Who weren't being inappropriate on social media. They were just being college kids, just noisy, right? Yeah. So it probably sticks for 30 to 40% where they're like, oh, this could be actually useful. Probably got 30 to 40% who it sticks short term, and they go back to their old ways, and then maybe 10-20%, it doesn't matter what I say, they're going to do whatever they want, right? Yeah. Well, I wanted to really get to that second 40% group. Like, how do I get them to change their behaviors long term? I've got to get to the coaches and the administrators, because they're the ones who are spending the time with these kids every day. Yeah. And so we went from just doing student athletes to we'd come to campus and do student athletes, and then do coaches and administrators as well. Yeah. To help them understand how to use it better, because it's a recruiting tool for them.
Yeah,
it's brand awareness
stuff. So most of them are not on it.
That's right. So it's huge for them, but also to help them have better conversations. Like, hey, coach, you can't be talking about MySpace to your players. Like, this is not going to work. Like, here's the conversations that you need to be having with your student athletes. And so as I had those conversations and was in the room more with administrators, I just got to hear their stories of what was and wasn't working about culture, about leadership. And so I realized there was a gap in leadership development in college sports. It's not unique to that world. That's just where I spend, most of my time. And as with most industries, they consider leadership development bringing in a speaker, rah, and they leave. And it's like, that's fine.
It lasts for 24 hours.
That's right. It's like a church camp high. Yeah. It's like, this is amazing. And then 2 weeks later, you're back to normal life. And because there's nothing practical, right? It's all 30,000 foot inspirational view, nothing on the ground level. And so I was like, there's got to be, and I personally love that style. Like, that's I love the inspirational, motivational, and that's kind of how I'm wired. But I also realized the limitations of that. And so I didn't know what to do with it. And so I started a daily email just to encourage, inspire anybody in the college sports world, and called it Fieldhouse Leadership. Very creative. So Fieldhouse Media, Fieldhouse Leadership. And then I started having ADs and coaches say, hey, will you come they're signing up for that email. Hey, will you come do a staff retreat for us? I'm like, again, kind of going back to being a social media expert, like ethically, I didn't feel right saying yes. I didn't have content. Yeah. I just had a bunch of ideas that I write emails. Like I had not built anything, didn't have any real specific principles or systems and so I didn't feel comfortable with that. Well, Jeremy Kubicek, who runs Giant, he was living in London at the time and was about to move back. And so he shot me an email, said, hey, I want to show you what we're working on. Mm-hmm. And so we sat down in a room with about 20 guys, and he walked through some of the core tools that Giant uses. And I was like, yes, whatever that was, I need it as a man, dad, husband, but that's the missing piece in college sports. And so I said, hey, I've got this Fieldhouse leadership thing. Mm-hmm. We have to figure out how to do this together. He's like, well, let's just partner Fieldhouse Leadership powered by Giant. Sure. And then we changed it from Fieldhouse Leadership to Culture Wins Championships, and then just Culture Wins. Yeah. Because it's not just about a football team or a baseball team. It's the communications office, the development office. Culture Wins Recruiting, Culture Wins Development, Culture Wins all these things. And so that was probably 5 years ago that we kind of join forces.
So that then, like you said, the perfect match and with the systems that Giant has and the stuff that they have, that then the ideas that you have, the content, it puts into perfect mix, right? And then you just skyrocket from there. And you got 2 books out now, right? Which the recent one is Keep Chopping Wood, right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah. And so it was we that clicked and just made sense. And Jeremy had kind of been a mentor since he had left Oklahoma City. He bought the Maxwell assets and started all this stuff with Catalyst and Maximum Impact and Giant Impact in Atlanta and then London. So we'd always stayed in touch. So that kind of marriage or partnership made sense. And that gave me, it felt like that was, I really believe in the idea of consistently reinventing yourself. Yeah. And so a lot of that, because I get bored really easily, which made doing the social media training actually nice. Like, even though it was generally the same talk,
it's always changing.
Different places, right? And social media changes. I'm in different schools, different people. And so that kept, I didn't get bored with that. But I love change. And I love a challenge. So now the challenge was, can I go from being the social media guy in college sports to being a leadership guy? Because there's a billion leadership guys, right? It's like you could walk downstairs to the coffee shop to Iote and find 4 people doing leadership consulting, right? Yeah. And so could I make that transition? Do I have it in me? Would people take me seriously enough? And so that required a whole practicing what I preach about social media, a whole shift in how I use social media. So I for the most part, I'll talk about student athlete social media stuff a little bit, but I made almost a hard shift from that into culture and leadership and self-awareness to get people, because my thing with social media is, what do you want people to think about you? Yeah. Like, whenever they see your name, what do you want them to think about? And because for most people, it's nothing, right? They have no purpose with that. They're just on social media because they feel like everybody is there. And so building Fieldhouse, they weren't going to think of me as a social media student athlete guy if I didn't post about social media and student athletes, right? And same thing with leadership. So I kind of put the social media stuff to the side, even though I still do that, and started talking about leadership and humility and self-awareness and repositioning myself as that for the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah. Which, like I said, is a lot longer and constantly reinventing. That's moving you in the right direction. And then I guess that's where the bigger side of the motivation stuff comes in, and the leadership stuff comes in and really takes over social media and the athlete side of things, because it's always going to be there, and it doesn't have to be just sports or college. It goes everywhere, and it's every aspect of the world we can apply this to.
That's right.
Which is really cool. Yeah. So that's been good, I guess, since the books have come out and
it's been great.
More talks.
Yeah. So I did one book. So I technically have 3. One I don't really count. So I wrote one on student athletes and social media probably 7 years ago. And that was mostly a marketing move to say, I wrote the book on student athletes and social media, right? I wouldn't recommend anybody buying it.
It's not on the website.
Probably not great. Then my second book, which is also not really a book, is called Leadership Interrupted. And it was really a collection of those daily emails. So I took 365 of those emails that I've been sending each day and put them into a book. Yeah. I'm actually probably going to rebrand that one as call it 5-minute leadership.
Okay.
I just need to sit down and actually do that. And then Keep Chopping Wood came out in May of this year. And that's probably my first actual book, even though it's really short. It's a short story, kind of fable style, but that one came out in May.
Yeah. And good journey, and then been fun trying to promote a book. And
So the story of the book is, in January, it was freezing, and our neighbor has a wood burning fireplace. And so it's like 10 o'clock at night. I can smell his fireplace burning, and I love it. And I have, for some reason, and my brain is just weird, but I have this thought of like, I wonder what the process of chopping wood is. Like, how do you get from tree to fireplace? And I realized that the process of chopping wood is like, you don't go chop down a tree, like, not that my neighbor's chopping down a tree anyway, right? But like, the wood in his fireplace was not recently chopped. Otherwise it'd be too wet. It's not useful. It's not ready. Wood gets chopped 9 to 12 months prior to being used.
Sure.
It's got to go through a process. And so I was like, man, that means people are out there chopping. And again, I know it's 2020. We probably have machines. People probably aren't chopping wood.
There's somebody out there chopping wood.
There's got to be somebody out there. But that means they're doing that knowing that it's not really going to be useful for 9 months, right? They're out there just doing the work because that's what the process requires, that you show up today and do the work. And so I, in my brain, translated that to team culture, right? That teams are going to go through the fire. You're not going to make it through the fire if you didn't chop wood together, if you didn't build that trust, those relationships. And so I fired off a tweet at like 10:30 at night. And Twitter for me is like, if I have a thought about leadership, it just goes there. And it's kind of a testing ground to see what sticks, what doesn't. Maybe I'll use that in a talk, or maybe I won't. But I go to bed, I tell my wife, like, I think I just had an idea for my next book. And I have about 20 of those a week. So she's like, I'm sure you did.
She's like, okay.
Yeah, she's like, okay, great. And so I wake up that Sunday morning, and I know this is a weird thing to say, but like, that tweet had like blown up. So I'm like, okay, that resonated. Like, really resonated. There's something there. And so then I used the story of it in my daily email on Monday. And I don't write those emails to get responses. It's just to kind of be an encouragement. So I might get one response a day. That one I got like 40. It was like, I gave this to my son. I gave this to my team. And I was like, okay, 2 for 2. Like, serious resonating with people. And so then I sat down the next day, Tuesday morning, downstairs at Iote, got a cup of coffee, and cranked it out in 4 hours. It's, again, short story. It's like 9,000 words. But it felt, you know, it's weird. It's like, I felt really good about it. I don't mean that to like pride or ego. Like, it felt like a message that needed to be out. It felt like something that people needed to hear. So I sent it to a bunch of people that I just trusted to get feedback, and people who would be honest and so not my mom. You know, she's like, oh, this is amazing. Like,
you wrote a book, another one, congrats.
That's right. She's like, this is so good. I'm like, it's terrible. Send it to people who would be critical would be critical because they're for me and I would trust them. And the feedback, it's just, it was wild. I'm like, okay, these are people who should be finding issues with it and grammar, you know, whatever, but like with the story itself, the concept, and they're all kind of freaking out. I had one who's a mentor of mine. He goes, if this book reaches nobody else, he goes, this guy's 50-ish. He's like, this is making a significant impact. Like, I'm rethinking. I'm like, which again, for me, like, I like big picture. I want to help thousands and millions, but like, all right, maybe it's just for him. Maybe that's good enough. You know. And so then it released in May, and it's been so wild to see. Because again, like I don't want to say put blood, sweat, and tears, because it was 4 hours, right? It's not like this. It wasn't this painstaking, like working on a book for years. It was 4 hours. But you just wonder, like, are people going to actually care? Who's going to buy it because they believe in it, not just because they're being nice and like being a good friend or supporter, which is, love those people as well. But then I get messages from people. It's like, this is probably 20 schools, small school, like high school, school districts have made it their like motto for the year. I'm like, what? Awesome. Like, it's just stuff like that. That's just, I got a message from a coach yesterday. It's like, hey, we've made this our motto for our team. I got it I don't know this coach. I don't have any relationship. So that's the part where it's really, really fun, where it's reaching people that I have zero connection to. And it's resonating. it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, it's great that it was natural, right? And and thankfully, like technology, you can just put this to paper ASAP. It's still in your mind, and you're like, this is working. But also, it resonates to so many people.
Yep.
The metaphor, it travels a lot. It's not just for sports. It keeps, it goes through everything you can think of. And yeah, I love that. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And it's, okay, you did do it in 4 hours, but it's the previous 10, 15 years of work that you've been doing leading to this point. That's just like, now I can do this. I know this is my,
That's right.
Everything, a lot of people, I think we all struggle with instant gratification and the whole, I want to be a millionaire now or billionaire, whatever it is. Well, something you don't see the 10, 15 years of hard graft that someone's done, and the business idea that was first that didn't make any money, and now you do, there's always another story to it. But that's really cool. So it's doing well, and I mean, what a year to launch a book, I guess, right? For a year,
who launches a book in the middle of a pandemic, right? And although at the same time, I've had a number of people who's like, no, it's the exact message we need at this time, especially so in the sports world, right? Because like a lot of them aren't having games. Yeah. So what do you actually, are you the kind of person who still shows up, who still prepares, who still does the work, who can separate yourself from the outcomes? Because it's easy to say, well, we don't have a game, why would I practice? Yeah. Or why would I do whatever? It's like, no, if you're this kind of person, that requires that you do this kind of work, that you show up in this, whether it's sports, whether it's business, whether it's your family, your health, whatever it may be. And so it's felt like it's the message, as weird as it is to release a book in the middle of a pandemic, is almost the right message for a pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned earlier you're constantly kind of reinventing and moving forward. What has been the most recent, I guess, reinvention, and where you think things are going now? Are things kind of staying the same, or I assume not? You're constantly evolving, and what's next?
Yeah. I plan to do this work that we're doing now with teams and with culture, and for a long time. I love it. I love seeing when people have these aha moments and start to go from like, I fully believe that most people are sleepwalking through life, right? We're just on autopilot because that's safe. Yeah. Right. Like the American dream is safe, if that makes sense. It's comfortable. It's easy. It's reasonable is maybe the best word for it. Right. Like go to college and get a degree and get a good job. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm not trying to be negative about it. I think it's just resulted in a lot of people just living right here. Yeah. And for me, when I say people like waking up and kind of coming alive and unlocking their potential, I don't mean they even quit their job. It just may mean they show up in a different way to that job, right? Because our culture has really made this like entrepreneurial, pursue your calling thing, like this really sexy thing. I'm like, no, it's really, really difficult. And 98% of people should go work, I don't know, in a sales job or an oil and gas or an education, whatever. Like go find a stable place. But it's how you show up there. Yeah. And so to say like, we're in Oklahoma, it's Oklahoma podcast. I'll say Chesapeake, maybe a bad example given current realities,
current situation.
But it's like, there's nothing wrong with, we've almost made it like you're weak or not fully alive if you go to work at Chesapeake. Yeah. And this isn't an anti-Chesapeake. It's just to go work at a desk job every day. It's like, no, that's a great thing. Go do that. Like that's honorable work. Like whatever you're providing for your family, it's awesome. But it's how you show up. So a lot of the work that we do are in organizations like that. It's even an athletic department at University of Oklahoma. Well, that's 300 staff members and 500 student athletes. It's still a business, right? It's people showing up and doing work each day. But to have these kind of breakthrough moments with people where that you realize and they realize everything now is going to be different. Again, doesn't mean new job, doesn't mean sell your house. It's just, I'm going to show up in a different way. Yeah. It's like I was, people were meant to do more than just kind of coast. Sure. And so that part of the work, I mean, do I care about working with teams who win championships? Sure. Like that's fun. That's good marketing. Yeah. I care a lot more about the people they're becoming along the way, and the impact that it's having on the leader, on their team, on their family, on their future. And so what will be next is probably I think continuing to innovate in our space. Sure. We launched a platform a year or so ago called Giant TV. Not a large TV, it's a giant TV. And it's basically you may pause. Okay. And it's basically it's an on-demand leadership development culture building platform, which we've relaunched or redesigned in the past month. So August 1, 2020, it went live very different with a free product and a team product. And it's videos, it's assessments where people can measure the health of their leadership and their team and their culture in real time.
Yeah.
And so it's super powerful. So now we're working on Culture Wins TV to take that same content and redevelop it for the sports world, to where there are people who will, and I try to be reasonable, with our fees, but there are people who will never be able to afford to have me come out, but they can get on a platform and invest with their whole organization, actually at a pretty cheap rate, and scale their leadership skills. So I think the future for me, the next is reinventing how we do what we do, to reach more people. I mean, my big kind of dream is to completely reshape the culture of American sports. Sure. Now, why not global sports? We'll see. And it's not, I'm not naive enough to think it's going to happen in my lifetime, right? It's like, this is a lot of work that's going to require a lot of people. But how do we make a dent? We got to reach a lot more people, and I can't. Right, I can only speak so many places, and so speaking, I hope will still happen. With the pandemic, I haven't been traveling, been doing a lot of Zoom calls. So speaking is always going to be part of it, but figuring out how we get our content and our systems into everybody's hands to scale and shift the culture of leadership in college sports and pro sports and high school sports in a massive way.
Yeah, I like that. And it's, like you said, whether it's from a book or from some platform or paying to have you come out, or having that talk that you've given at a university be videoed and somebody seeing that video 6 months later on YouTube or whatever it is, like there's always going to be value in that content. And just, the more, like I said, the more people you can get that to, then the more impact, and eventually over time, that's going to become normal to them and constantly evolving. And
that's right.
And I think, like you said earlier, having people working a desk job and just coming to work and not just showing up, mailing it in, but coming down, really like making it the best experience for a customer, for a client, whatever it is. Like my wife works at a title company, and she people coming in every day to close on their house. It's a huge deal.
That's right.
Some people can be, you're talking a lot of money. It's a big, it's a big investment or a big moment for their lives, and it might be, there's a lot of emotion that goes in that. Right. So, it's like, for her, it's trying to be as level-headed and make it the best experience possible. And
but it's a ton of work for her. Like, that's especially right now. Yeah, that's an insane job to be in, right?
Yeah,
like,
she's busy.
Which is a good thing. Even that the goodness of being busy, but we can start to complain. I'm overwhelmed. I'm working too many hours or whatever. But we can, and the question I've been asking a lot lately is, right, because we can say, well, she could just go work at a title company and she could show up on purpose. She could have a great attitude. She could try to make it a great experience. She doesn't have to. And people say, well, that's cheesy, or that's like mumbo jumbo. Like, well, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
To just hate what you do, to show up like, all right, well, I guess I'll do the work today. Just good enough to get a paycheck, not good enough to get real influence or more responsibility, but just enough to coast. And it's like, why? Why would you ever choose to show up that way? And people aren't choosing to show up that way. They're just not choosing to not show up that way, right? It's like, because nobody chooses to be negative, to be half engaged, to be whatever. It's like, we're just not choosing to be positive, to show up on purpose. Yeah. And what happens in a company like a title company when people actually care? It's like, and especially for that, it's like you nailed it. It's like what she's doing. Like these are life moments for people. Yeah. Right. It's like we can, when it's your work, it's easy to see, it's just another closing, another day, right? Yeah. Whatever. It's like, no, this is a significant moment. And when you see that, it's like, man, I get to make a life moment for someone today. I need to be at my best. When I was in the healthcare world, it was you're supposed to make 100 phone calls a day, right? Because it's a numbers game. Recruit, what we call it, qualifying nurses, which basically getting their resumes, right? Yeah. So talk to as many nurses as possible, get as many resumes as you can, get as many referrals as you can, as many job interviews as you can, so you can get as many placements as you can. And so it was 100 phone calls a day, which for me and my personality, I'm like, I'd rather smash my head through a wall. I'm going to figure out how to do it in 20.
Totally the same way.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to do it in 20 because for me, if I'm making 100 phone calls a day, it means I'm having no meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to actually do my job well. If I can do it in 20, then I'm building connection. Then I've got real clients, real customers, and we can work some magic. But it's really easy to just look at all we had. Our KPIs up on our board, like we need this and this, like all these, the data for everyone. And it's just easy to get lost in that, and even making good money and like being successful in that. It's like it's easy to get bogged down. And our boss one day, he told this great story. He was sitting at like a Hibden, getting his tires changed or rotated, whatever. And he's sitting next to some stranger, and they strike up a conversation. And our main focus in the healthcare world was dialysis. So we're finding dialysis nurses to send to open dialysis clinics.
Yeah.
And usually for temporary assignments. And so it turns out this guy sitting next to my old boss was a dialysis patient. So they're talking, and my boss said, tell me about your nurses. Like, do you like them? Do they take care of you? And what's that experience like? And the guy said, man, I would not be alive without those nurses. He's like, I am so grateful. They keep me alive. So he came back and said, guys, we're not just making 100 phone calls a day. We're impacting that man. Yeah. We're keeping people like him alive. So don't get lost in the numbers, realize the impact. And it's like, yes, when you think that way, like it's more than just making phone calls. It's more than just closing on homes. It's like, what's the real impact? When you get that, you can show up in a different way.
And there's always more to it, isn't it? There's always, and like back to your chopping wood analogy, like you know, that wood has been chopped 9 to 12 months before. You don't see the result, the fire or whatever it is, you know, in your work. So when someone is putting in those constant hours, they're coming to work, they're showing up differently with intention. 12 months later, they may get a promotion. Right?
That's right.
Or they may meet someone that has that impact. It's like, hey, here's another job opportunity. I love what you've been doing for the last year, consistently seeing you show up.
That's right.
So it goes a long way.
And we get so impatient, right? Because we want, like you said, we live in a drive-through culture. I can, on the way to the office, thankfully I have a short commute. It's like a mile. But I can drive through and get money. I can drive through and get medicine. I can drive through and get food. I can drive through and get my dry cleaning. Whatever I want, I can drive through and get it. And so we expect that type of progress, that type of success in everything, whether it's losing weight, whether it's getting a promotion, whether it's hitting our sales goal. Like that's just not how anything worthwhile actually works. And we know that, but we lose sight of that. And so we just get so impatient and so frustrated. It's like, no, just keep showing up. It's like, and maybe you don't get the promotion. You still got better, right? It's like, maybe you didn't lose, maybe your goal was to lose 50 pounds and you've hit 40. Well, you lost 40 pounds. Like, in what world is that bad? Right. You know, but like we didn't hit that goal, so we decide we're a failure. It's like, no, you
look a lot better than you did.
That's right. If you had told yourself a year ago you're going to lose 40 pounds, you'd be like, what? That's amazing. But because it wasn't 50, you're like, oh, I failed. I didn't reach my goal. It's like, no, you always made progress. You always got better. You just have to have a better perspective on it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure sharing some of the stories and listening to you speak and just stuff that you've done over the years, and I wish you all the best, for the future and for the end of 2020 and doing a lot of Zoom stuff, but hopefully you get to travel sometime soon. For everyone listening, how can they follow you? How can they buy the book? Where's the best place to go? Stuff like that.
Yeah, easiest. I'm at Kevin Deshazo everywhere. So KevinDeshazo. My website is deshazo.me. The book Keep Chopping Wood is on Amazon, or you can just go to keepchoppingwood.com.
Awesome. Well, mate, really appreciate your time. For everyone listening, I'll post all those links down below in the description. You can go check those straight after you listen to this podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers. This podcast was presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who've been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com and definitely on Instagram at oklahomahof. Catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.